Right guys, so my name's Aaron from Mofo Body Mechanic and I'm joined by a good friend of ours, Emma Hyman, the posing pro.
Hi guys.
And these are 3 things that you should be doing from your hips. Now just to give this some context and some background, we talked earlier about lockdown and everybody's activity levels changing, and we said that a lot of people have spent more time sat down, either being desk-based working from home or online coaching or online posing. And I think as a result, and I certainly noticed this and you did the same, that hips and lower back took an absolute beating. Now, if we're thinking about it from a purely performance perspective, and Emma's going to talk a little bit from a posing perspective in a second, the hips are the engines for your spine. So I think a lot of your heavy compound movements, your squats, your deadlifts, your bent over rows to a greater or lesser extent, all rely on a certain amount of hip mobility. Sitting down, it's accumulative, so mobility, the more you do it, the better you get. The less you do it and the less you move around, the worse you get. And I think from your perspective, we saw it at the back end of start of this lockdown, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And Emma had started to struggle with her back because fundamentally your movements have changed from what you were used to doing in the clinic.
As a lifestyle, my daily routine and how the body is held on a daily basis completely changed. So I went from being in the studio every single day, essentially just stood up straight and always moving, to being sat in flexion for 8 hours a day at my laptop doing Skype sessions. And as a result for that, over 3 months, my body just in the end was absolutely screaming at me. I think then I came back to the gym, started training properly, didn't really pay attention to the mobility, which I take my mobility for granted because I'm a dancer and I'm a lot more supple, so it's something that's always there for me, and I can do the splits any day of the week. But I just really.
Me too.
How are you split? Should I have a look at those today?
Yeah, we'll have a look at those if you want to.
So the hip mobility in the lower back, it was more of a case of I could just really feel the hip flexors almost like squeezing in and becoming really, really tight. So
were you getting like pinching in your hips at the front when you were going into that sort of?
They were pinching, like the hips at some stages. It felt like the hips were, like I said to you, like a burning sensation, which then started to track down to the knees and the lower back. And typical me, let it escalate. And then one night had to emergency call Aaron. I don't know what's going on. So we just put some stuff together. Well, Aaron did. I implemented that, and then I also knew that I just need to be accountable with my stretching. So I started to work one-to-one with a yoga instructor as well, which is something I think for me it's very important, because it just it gives me that all-over stretch and open, and makes the body and the energy feel really open as well. So so we're just trying to encourage everyone else to do the same thing.
Now, from a posing perspective, what do you see as some of the biggest issues with the clients that you're seeing from posing?
Lower back mobility, and the hip flexors are always tight. I think because we spend a lot of time focusing on the glutes and training the legs, and I think that's the main area that we really hammer, and we don't do any kind of mobility work to really help keep things lengthened and long and improve on the mobility. Now, just to touch on what you were saying there, mobility takes time and it takes consistency, and it's something that needs to be practiced a lot in order to improve. And if you're not consistently doing that, then you will find that your level of mobility and flexibility will not improve or maintain. So you have to almost continuously keep upping the ante. No days off. Exactly. So it's for the posing, it's lower back mobility, it is hip flexors, and then for the guys it's usually a lot of thoracic mobility and shoulder mobility, but we're going to focus on the hips today.
So these are the 3 things that you should be doing for your hips in order to keep your hips healthy, to keep your mobility around the hip joints and the lower back working optimally, to make sure that you can pose effectively, and more importantly from my perspective, but probably less so from your perspective, get into the gym and train as hard as you possibly want to.
And also just to add to that, through the online program that I devised, a lot of the athletes, as a side comment, they said, my lifting has improved,
because
their range of mobility has improved. So it's just a fine example of how important the two areas cross over.
It's efficiency, isn't it? I think if you can move more efficiently, 3 plates aside and you squat feels like 1 plate aside. And that ultimately, you know, if you're lifting more weight and you're lifting that weight more efficiently, you're going to build more muscle.
You're going to have a better physique.
Yeah.
So it all goes hand in hand.
So this is the 90-90 stretch, and we're going to do a 90-90 transition to go onto the other side. In this position, we're working the external rotation on the front leg and internal rotation on the back leg. And Emma's going to very kindly and aptly demonstrate these positions. So in position, so front legs forwards. Now 90-90 comes from the fact that on Emma's right leg, the knee is bent at 90 degrees. And on Emma's left leg, again, the knee is bent at 90 degrees. Now, some of the common mistakes that people make as far as these are concerned is they tend to, when they go into position, they tend to overextend the lower back. Now, we don't want to do that. We want to try and create the rib cage down. And we want to bend forwards from the pelvis and the back as a unit. So we're going to spend a little bit of time just camping out over that front leg just to improve the external rotation movement. Now this, from Emma's perspective, is probably fairly comfortable. You could sit in that position all day. And that's typical. Most people have got very good external rotation, but have got less good internal rotation. So if you come back up to the center position for us, Emma, now turn to face towards the front, so turn your body to face towards the front. So we're now working onto the left leg and the internal rotators. Now again, we're going to camp out here, and I think from a stretching perspective, the longer you hold these stretches for, the more effective your stretch becomes. So typically in this position, I might spend 2 minutes working with clients in these mobility positions post-workout. If this is pre-workout, you want to keep your stretching short and sweet, because stretching reduces power and stretching reduces strength overall. Now, this leg, come onto your toes for me. And I just want you to go into external rotation and then back down again as high as you can, whilst keeping the other leg in contact with the floor. Lovely. So we're going to do a few reps going from external to internal rotation. And then we're going to take this leg now, keep it up, and we're going to slowly transition into our bear sit, or our 90-90 transition. Now, ideally in this position, side of your foot onto the floor, both legs, and just try and allow your knees to drift down towards the floor, to drop down towards the floor. So we're going to spend, again, a little bit of time in this position. So if it's pre-workout, you might spend 10-15 seconds in your transition position. If this is post-workout, then you might spend, you know, upwards of 30 seconds to a minute transitioning from one side to the other side. Now from there, you're going to very aptly go into the 90-90 position on the other side. So left leg at 90 degrees, right leg at 90 degrees. So we're talking about 90 degrees knee bend. And again, lift yourself, rib cage down, bend forwards over the front leg. Lovely. So again, pre-workout, you know, no more than 30 seconds in this position, so we're not affecting power or strength. Post-workout, we could camp out in these positions for up to 2 minutes. So back into the center there for me, Emma, and then do your thing with the foot. So come onto your toes, go from internal to external, and back down again. So what we're looking for here is to really fire up that glute. So it's all about firing the glutes on the leg that we're lifting. So this is working towards end range control. And I think one of the things I'd say about mobility is we're increasing range of movement, and by firing up the muscles that produce that range of movement, we're producing a safe range of movement because your central nervous system's aware of it. I think stretching for the sake of stretching, potentially pre-lift, is dangerous because your brain hasn't become accustomed to that additional range of movements. You go into a full squat depth, full depth squat even, and you find that that end range is relatively unprotected. So Emma's going to turn around to the front, keep that knee down. And those are the 3 hip mobility exercises that you should be doing if you want to look after your hips and improve your lifting and your posing performance.
I have a question
go on.
about this position.
Yeah.
foot position, should you be trying to bring the knees and the feet closer to the body to feel more in the...
I think for somebody like you, yes.
Yeah, so,
I think
but you're going to find that most people are probably
have been there.
away.
Yeah. So I think if you've got good mobility through the hips, then bring the feet closer.
Yeah.
If your mobility is not great through the hips, then allow your feet to extend further away. I mean, I think the thing is, from a mobility point of view, for somebody like you, Emma, I probably wouldn't prescribe a 90-90 because I think your hip mobility is such that you're not really getting much from that. So I think having a scattergun approach to your mobility is probably one of the... a lot of it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
For someone like you, you'd be better off doing some different things to target the specific areas. But if you are struggling from an internal external rotation perspective through the hips, this is a really nice one to implement into your pre and post mobility routine.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.